Welcome, NC Church family and everyone that is watching us by Facebook Live or by YouTube. We're glad that you're joining us tonight. This is April the 1st, and it's hard to believe that this is already our third week doing Bible study on a Wednesday night in this format. But we are so honored that you are joining us, and we just thank you for being with us. And we're excited about tonight's Bible study, and we hope it'll be a great blessing to you. And we want you to stay tuned. At the end of this, I'm going to talk about Sunday and what we're expecting on that great day this coming Sunday, Palm Sunday. But for tonight, we want to get started right away. We love you. Glad you're here. And Pastor Steve's leading our thought for the night. So, Pastor Steve, we turn it to you, and we're glad that you're leading us this evening.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to be joining you there in your houses and wherever you're at watching this tonight. And we're just going to dive right in here in just a minute. I want to remind you that this is an interactive Bible study. So as you're hearing these questions, I want you to think about that at your house and talk with those that are near you, maybe your loved ones, your family, and even make some comments on the Facebook Live feed there, because we'd like to see what your thoughts are on this as well. This is not just our ideas, but we're gathered together at the table here to share our ideas and have you chime in when you get a chance. So we thank you for joining us tonight. You know, I was thinking this week about what I would share tonight and what we would talk about for this Bible study. And the word that kept popping in my mind is the word limbo. Matter of fact, when I talked to Gary a couple of weeks ago, I said, Gary, I'm thinking on talking on the word limbo. Now, I'm not talking about the game where you bend on your back, backwards, and you're just trying to get underneath the pole. I'm talking about the word limbo, where you're kind of in a state of uncertainty, a state of not knowing really what to do. And we find ourselves in that place right now in America and all over the world. And then Pastor Larry kind of confirmed that just the other day. We were talking, and he was sharing some ideas that he had for Bible studies. And one of the ideas that he had was waiting in limbo. So I thought to myself, well, that must be a God-ordained topic. So that's where we're at tonight, and I want to start with just talking about that. But have you guys ever been on a flight somewhere, and you get to your destination, and you're ready to land, and you're excited? Maybe you're going on vacation, maybe you're on a business trip or whatever it is. But all of a sudden, the captain comes on the radio there, and he says, "I'm sorry, folks, we're going to be circling the airport. We're unable to land at this time. There's not a runway that's available." Anybody ever been in that situation?
Yeah. I think probably all of us have, and some of these guys got some pretty great stories. I've heard some of your. I don't know a bit about circling and not landing, but I've been detoured to other airports, and I have been caught in other places or fogged in, and you couldn't take off because where you were going, and so you're already on the plane and you're just stuck.
Right.
And just 3 hours of just sitting there and not going anywhere, and you're trying to get somewhere because you have something that's supposed to happen, and but nothing happens, but you're just, there you are.
Right, and there are those as well. That's just the opposite, where you're sitting on the tarmac, you're ready to take off, your stuff is all loaded, and you're just waiting for the captain to come on board and say, okay, we're ready for takeoff. And it just doesn't happen. And he keeps coming back with a delay. And matter of fact, William and I kind of experienced this not long back when we went to New York for the CIA, the Cross-Examine Academy, which is an instructor's academy by Dr. Frank Turek, who was with us just a few weeks ago. And we kind of experienced that. Tell them what happened to you that day.
So I was in North Carolina, and I had an early flight, and I got to the airport. I was ready, and I had seen there's been a lot of storms, so I was texting back and forth with Pastor Steve, asking him, hey, are your flights getting out? Because my flight kept getting postponed, delay, and I was there literally from 8 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, and my flight was canceled. Luckily, it was a long day, and I kept thinking, it's getting postponed, it's getting pushed back, but my flight still wasn't canceled. So I still had like a little bit of hope. I'm like, I'm gonna get it, I'm gonna get there. Because the CIA, it started the next morning. So I'm like, I'm gonna be able to at least get there. Even if it's late, I'll still get there, so I'll be ready in the morning. And my flight got canceled at the very last flight that was canceled. And luckily, my wife was still there, so she came and picked me up, and the next morning we did the exact same thing. We got there, and there wasn't any storms at our airport, so they put us on the plane. We went out on the tarmac, and we sat there for an hour. Because of all those flights that were delayed the day before, all New York City was overbooked with flights. Right. So we were literally just sitting on the tarmac for an hour, and the pilot came back and said, you guys need to come back in because we don't have enough fuel to make it now. So we had to get off the plane. They had us reboard the plane. We went out and sat on the tarmac again for another hour, and then they had us come back again because there was a storm. It was a nightmare.
So and me likewise, I caught the last flight out that night. My early flight was canceled, and I had an option. Do I try to get on the next flight or the next flight? So I just chose, and I just prayed, Lord, let me get on this flight. And I chose the last flight of the day, and I got on it and got there in the middle of the night to get there in time for the first day, which William missed because of the delays there in North Carolina. But I tell you, there's nothing like being in that situation. That it's beyond your control. You can't control anything. You're really stuck. You really are. You're helpless. You're anxious. You're concerned, and all you can do is just wait and wonder, when is this trial ever going to end? And does that sound familiar to anybody?
Well, I won't speak to my experience, but I do remember a time many, many years ago where you were stuck in Europe.
That is
just
true.
Trying to get home.
Another great illustration, Gary. Leave it up to Gary to remember one of my stories. Thank you very much, Gary. But it's a familiar situation, right? Because we're all in it. We're all in it right now. Here we are, all in the same boat. We're in this shelter at home thing going on right now in our county. Restrictions of the amount of people that can gather together. We're not together physically in church, so we're talking via Facebook Live right now. But we're just waiting. If you want to know what we're doing here at North Central, we're doing the best that we can to keep busy and to keep the ministry going. But we're like you. We're just waiting. We're stuck. We're helpless. We're wondering when this thing is going to ever end. And it's not our fault. We didn't cause this pandemic. We didn't do anything that to deserve this, but we're all impacted by it. And it's frustrating, isn't it? What are some of the frustrations that maybe you guys are feeling right now with this shelter in place thing going on?
I think the greatest frustration has been trying to work out which voice is true, in all of this, and trying to work around that and be respectful of the limitations we've been given from authority, but also trying to work out what can we still do in ministry, what can we still do to reach people. And a lot of our guys have said it, there is just no replacement for being with people in person. And but it's just what we're in at the minute, and so trying to work through it and being respectful of people that are onlooking, but also saying, actually, God, could you use this situation? So trying to find that fine line between the two sides has been the challenge for us.
It's good. Anybody else? Any thoughts?
I think what a lot of people struggle with is that we tend to be creatures of habit, and we have routines, and all of our routines are very different, how our days are structured and what we do and how we go about our day and the things that we like to do to feel accomplished by the end of the day. And that when all of those routines are thrown out the window and you can't fall into those same habits that make you feel like you're pushing forward and moving forward, you're just stuck. I think it makes you feel stuck. I mean, literally stuck, to where my daughter said to me today, "What day is it?"
Right.
What day?
Right,
What day are we in? Because we've been stuck in the house, and you try to be creative and do things. But I think creatures of habit.
Well, listen, I think other frustrations, I think we'd all agree is we want to go to work. There are some of you that are at home working from home. You want to leave your house to go to work. You want to go to the mall. I bet some of you are having some serious withdrawals from going to the mall. I'm not going to name any names in my house, but I promise you there's one. But just being able to gather with friends. How about going to a nice restaurant? Don't you miss being able to go sit down and Papacitos and eat some chips and just enjoy being there in that atmosphere. You miss all. We miss the normalcy, and of course, I think we would all agree we miss church. We miss being together. We miss you guys. And we see each other on a daily basis because the pastors are coming in, but we miss you guys tremendously. But we're stuck in limbo and uncertain of when things are going to change. We're just waiting. And I can't help but think of, there's many Bible stories. Many of our Bible heroes were kind of in similar positions in the Bible. I think of Abraham. God had promised Abraham that he was going to be the father of many nations, and he would have an offspring of, that number the stars and all of these things. But here he is. He doesn't have a son. And so God gives him a son, but during this time, Abraham has to wait, and he waits till he's 100 years old. By this time, you almost feel like, well, he's given up. And his wife, of course, she's 90. And talk about waiting. And I think of Joseph in the Bible. He's sold into slavery by his brothers. Somebody preached about this just recently. Maybe it was Gary that was talking about this just the other day. But, he works his way up to a position of importance there in Egypt. And he's doing everything right. And then all of a sudden he's falsely accused of something. He's thrown into prison. And he's just, what did I do to deserve this? I'm stuck. I'm stuck. And then I think of Joshua and Caleb, the only 2 spies of Moses' 10 spies that go out and they view the promised land, and all 8 of them come back and say, hey, we can't defeat these people. And so God punishes all of them really at that time. So they had to wait. They couldn't enter the promised land. Eventually they would enter the promised land, but they had to wait for 40 years. That's right. And then David, of course, was anointed king as a young boy, and he has to wait years before he would become king. Many years of uncertainty. And so there's many stories in the Bible, but of all of them, the one that really stands out to me and feels kind of more relatable to our situation, our state of limbo that we find ourselves in, is the story of Job. Of Job. I don't know when the last time you guys have read that story of Job, but it's really an interesting, powerful story of just patience and waiting, and you sense a lot of the human questioning that's going on there. He's human just like us. He's not just a figure in the Bible. He's a person just like us, and so but. Just let's talk about Job for a minute. What are some of the characteristics or the qualities or the things that we know about Job?
Well, the Bible's called him a righteous man. I think that's what signaled him out and made him to stand out. So that the Lord says, have you considered, when there's this dialogue going back between Satan, Lucifer, and the Lord, and God says, have you considered my servant Job? Right. It was that righteousness. We always like to call the patience of Job. We say the patience of Job, and sometimes in our everyday. But the thing that stands out about Job is that though we don't have a lot of background about him, we can tell by just in reading the story, the narrative about him in the book of Job, that he was somebody who really knew how to trust the Lord. And you see that even in the questions that come later, you can see that he really understood who the Lord was in his life. I would call him a godly man.
Absolutely.
I think the first thing when you read Job, because it talks about Satan coming, to God, and there's this conversation that happens, and you're kind of like, what's going on here? We haven't seen this before. And I think that we learn something about God's character in that story. And it's kind of like, wow, God isn't caring for his comfort. God is, what's going on here? Doesn't God care for our feelings? Doesn't God care for us to be, in this place of state of happiness all the time? And so it takes it past feelings, and you're kind of like, well, God has a bigger plan than just our feelings and how we feel in the moment. And you see at the end of the story, we'll probably go there, that God did have a plan. But I think it eradicates the idea that God is worried about, or worried in a big way about our in the moment, happiness or feelings. And so Absolutely. It's a really interesting side of God. And you're like, whoa, okay, God is like that.
Yeah, so we know that, as Pastor Larry said, Job was righteous. The Bible calls him blameless. I mean, he is a godly man. What else? I mean, looking at his character, and what do we know about him?
So what I think about Job is, so we know he had family, we know he had money, and we know he had health. Yeah. But when he lost everything, what really stands out to me is that he asks, oh, how I might know God. Oh, how I might know him. Mm-hmm. He didn't say, oh, what happened to my family? What happened to my wealth? What happened to my health? He understood the importance of the right relationship with God. And that's what really stands out to me about Job, his character. Even though everything in his life is lost, he understands how important it is that I might have him.
Well, let's dive in a little bit here real quick. So we know that he was godly, and we know that he was wealthy, and we know that he had good health, and we know that he had a large family and was respected. He was a person of influence. Job really had it all. Wouldn't you agree? He had everything that he ever would need. He was blessed. And on top of that, he was a person of integrity. God called him blameless. you know. And so the story, as Pastor Larry was just saying, goes like this. You know, Satan comes before God and he tells God, he says that he's been roaming the earth. And I thought this was interesting, watching everything that's going on, almost implying that, you know, God, mankind is really corrupt. I mean, that's the feeling that you get when he approaches God. Hey, I've been roaming the earth. I've been watching what's going on, you know, and mankind's corrupt. But then God, of course, says, but have you considered Job? You know, here's a man, have you seen my servant Job? And he proceeds to brag about how righteous Job is. And then Satan, who in this passage is called the accuser, you know, he tells God the only reason Job is so righteous is because God has blessed him so much. That's the only reason that he's so righteous. He's got good health. He's got good wealth. He's an influencer. And God basically says, okay, that's not true. So I tell you, you know, take away his stuff, but he'll still be faithful. He'll still be a man of integrity. And so Satan then puts into place this plan to cause devastation in the life of Job. And God allows it to test Job's faith. And so we look at Job chapter 1, verse 13 through 19. And in my opinion, this is arguably the most devastating few verses in the Bible. And if you have your Bible there, look at it with me. I'll read it for you. It says this. It says, one day when Job's sons and daughters were feasting at the oldest brother's house, a messenger arrived at Job's house with the news, your oxen were plowing with the donkeys, feeding beside them. And when the Sabians raided us, they stole all the animals, killed all the farm hands, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you. That's bad. Yeah. Verse 16, while he was still speaking, another messenger arrives with the news. The fire of God has fallen from heaven and burned up your sheep and all the shepherds. I am the only one who escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, verse 17, a third messenger arrived with this news. 3 bands of Chaldeans, raiders, have stolen your camels and killed your servants. I'm the only one who escaped to tell you. Verse 18, what do you think's coming? While he was still speaking, that's right, another messenger arrived with this news. Your sons and daughters were feasting in their oldest brother's home, and suddenly a powerful wind swept in from the wilderness and hit the house on all sides, and the house collapsed, and all your children are dead. I am the only one who would escape to tell you. Imagine that. We were talking about it earlier today, you know, this whole situation. Somebody asked, we really don't know how much time had passed. No, it's very clear how much time has passed. It's all happening while he was speaking. This is going on. This was a matter of minutes. You know, Gary, what would your response be if someone came to you and says, Gary, all of your savings is gone. Hey, by the way, you know, all of your, you know, whatever livelihood that you're doing, your job, you've been fired. You know, Gary, your kids have been killed. I mean, what would be the reaction?
Devastation. I mean, just devastating.
Right.
Which is one of the reasons why, you know, one of my things that stand out about Job is how deep his faith was.
Yeah.
Because in spite of the loss, and I don't want to get ahead of you, but it was one of the things I was going to share is that you know, when we lose things, when we experience loss, some of us have a tendency to run when that spiritual rug is pulled out from under us. But Job didn't.
Yeah.
I would be devastated.
Absolutely.
At that kind of loss.
Absolutely.
You know,
we would all be.
I think that's where we get the whole saying, when it rains, it pours.
Right.
And we all have had those moments, not to the extreme, I would think majority of us of Job, because this is on a whole nother level. But I think we can all relate to that, because I think we've all had things where it feels like everything is compiling on top of it. If I'd have been Job, I'd have quit answering the door, I think, at some point, because I don't even want to go to the door because it's so bad. But we can all feel that in our own way. I remember when my kids were all in school, it felt like when one of them in college, felt like when one of our kids' cars broke down, all 3 of them broke down.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, what else can go wrong? You know, then I remember the day that we paid off Haley's car, and that day she had an accident. I mean, it's just how it goes. That moments where and you say to yourself, okay, Lord, okay. And it just feels like one thing after the next, and you start looking up and say, okay, God. But like you said, this is where Job really shows his faith.
And he's gone from wealthy to poor. He's gone from prosperous to failure. He's gone from father to fatherless, all in a matter of minutes, really. But you look at verse 20 to 22, and this goes along with what you're saying, Gary. But it says this. It says, verse 20 says, Job stood up and he tore his robe in grief, which was common in that custom, and he shaved his head. And then it says he fell to the ground to worship. He said, I came naked from my mother's womb, and I will be naked when I leave. The Lord gave me what I had, and the Lord has taken it away. Praise the name of the Lord. And I like verse 22. It's kind of interesting that it's placed in there, but it says, in all of this, Job did not sin by blaming God. Now, why do you think, that the author would put that verse in there? What do you think the author is trying to convey there through all of this?
What I really like is even at the beginning of this story, when the accuser is coming to God, he's saying, but have you thought of Job? And what it tells me is that God knows our heart, right? And that's important because somebody that I feel really bad for people right now who don't know the Lord, because when they look at the world around them, there is no hope.
No hope.
No hope. Everything seems to be getting worse. And one of the worst things about right now, in my opinion, is the unknown. We have no idea the timeline, right? They're saying, okay, 30 days, April 30th. But at that point, they could say another 30 days and another 30 days. We just don't know.
We've already seen that, yeah.
Right. And so the unknown of it, but God knows our heart. And that's what I really like about that verse, because it's saying that God already knew this ahead of time. He knew where Job's heart was going to be. And right there, Job proved him.
Yeah.
Proved him right.
It says in all of this, Job did not sin by blaming God. Job wasn't blaming God for the, things that had fallen upon him.
I think kind of what I was saying a minute ago is that God's character isn't, through this, you're kind of seeing that God's character isn't for the, momentary comforts. And obviously Job understood that as well. And I think that things get confusing for us when we see being rich as being blessed by God, or having all these things, and then it gets confusing when we lose it because we think God has taken away his blessing. What did I do wrong? Or who is God to take away this blessing from me? And then we get really, really confused. And because we have a wrong view of who God is, but Job just had a right view of God, and he knew that God could give or take away, and to have it taken away would have been a blessing maybe to him as well. He maybe saw that as a blessing in a way. And so that's crazy though that he was able to praise God.
So the story doesn't end there though. The story continues. Okay, now that he's lost his things, he's lost his kids. Satan goes back to God and basically says, well, you let me affect his health, and I promise you he'll curse you. And God says, okay. In God's sovereignty, he says, okay. And so what happens to Job? He's now afflicted with boils all over his body. I don't know if you ever had a boil, but they're very painful. Many of you out there had boils. They're very, very painful. And so we know that he's not only now in physical pain, of course, he's already in emotional pain, in the loss of everything. He's lost everything. And in his mind, he's got to be asking, why? What have I done to deserve this? I don't deserve this. But he's lost everything, and now the physical pain that goes along with it. And I find it interesting right there, and that's when, you start hearing this bickering going on, and his wife jumps in, who, you got to give her a little bit of, I think, leeway in the fact that she's grieving. Yes. She lost her kids too. She's lost everything too. But her response is totally different than Job's, because she comes to him and she says, are you still trying to maintain your integrity? Just curse God and die. That's pretty harsh. Yeah. That's pretty harsh.
What I really like is that through this, it really shows us what the man of God is supposed to be, the head of the household. Because Job's response is important, right? What you're about to read.
Well, he does set her in her place, that's for sure. And I don't recommend any of you guys use this, okay? But he says, you talk like a foolish woman. He says, should we accept only good things from the hand of God and never anything bad? That's the part I want to emphasize more than what he said to her. Should we accept only good things from the hand of God and never anything bad? So in all of this, the scripture says, in all of this, Job said nothing wrong. And that's amazing.
I think that goes back to what Pastor Johnny was talking about earlier, the character of the character of God, and even of Job himself. He kept his integrity. And when you're talking about, sometimes when we're strained and we're being pulled to we're like so thin, that rubber band that's so thin, and it's just at that point of breaking. Job kept his integrity in that.
Yeah.
When all the forces around him were telling him to abandon it all.
Right.
And I agree with you, Pastor Steve, on that, about his wife, giving her the leeway, because she is You sense that in that, and she was probably a righteous woman, just like Job was a righteous man. But you sense in that those words that she's so overcome with emotion and grief and hurt that she has a reaction sometimes that we have.
Right.
Just want to just curse God.
Right.
But Job, he shows us this path that is possible for all of us. That he says, should we only accept, and that goes back to what you said earlier, Pastor Johnny, should we only accept the good and not the bad? In other words, it's God is who God is.
Right.
And in everything it goes and says that Job did not sin. Man, that's all of us should be striving for that.
Right.
Especially now.
It's true. And human nature wants to blame. When we lose something, when something goes wrong, when life throws us a curveball, we want somebody to point a finger to. We want somebody to have angst against because we are suffering loss and we want recovery of some kind. Right. And so when we can cast blame on somebody like we see from Job's wife, in a way, it kind of makes us feel better even though it doesn't solve anything. Right. And I think the example that you see here is, as Pastor was talking about, is how we should. Job made a conscious choice to trust and to believe and to lean on the Lord. And I think what you see in his wife is human nature. Just human nature when you're going through grieving, as you were just talking about, and you're dealing with loss and giving them the leniency to do so. It's the difference between a deep down faith and leaning on the flesh. And she had every right to lean on the flesh. Yeah. She was grieving. But you see a real appropriate response here from Job.
That's good. And so in the story, the next few chapters, basically, Job is having conversation, if you were to read that in the book of Job, with three of his friends, and he's, lamenting and having conversations with God, and he wants to die. And I mean, he's at a deep, dark place too, but he still hasn't cursed God. He still has not blamed God. He's just in a place where, God, if this is what it's going to be like, just take my life. I would be better off dead, right? But, because he didn't deserve what he went through. He didn't ask for it. He was stuck, waiting just in limbo, waiting for an ending to his ordeal. And when we go through times of uncertainty, like we're facing now here in America and around the world, waiting in limbo, what can we do? What should we do? I came up with just a few ideas, some of them based upon the text there, but others just based upon some thoughts that the Lord laid in my heart. And I just encourage you again on Facebook, if you want to chime in with some ideas, we're going to go back and look at this, and we would love to hear your thoughts on this as well. But so here's just a few thoughts on when waiting in limbo, we need to, and some of these are going to be profound. Get ready. I'm going to blow your mind away. You ready? Just be patient. Just be patient. It's easier said than done, right? I think about, I read the story as a cute little illustration, and I won't get it right unless I kind of look at my notes here, but there was an elderly missionary woman who was teaching a Bible class, and she was explaining a system that she had for memorizing scripture and for reading the entire Bible through in a calendar year. And one of her students confessed, and she said, that she had read the whole Bible through a few times, but she tended to skip a few parts, like the genealogies. Anybody know what I'm talking about? The genealogies, the begats. And so she asked the teacher, she said, I find those very boring. So what do you do when you come to the begats? And so the little missionary teacher, little lady, she said, well, I read them. They're part of scripture. The student asked, but what on earth could I possibly learn by reading them over year after year? And with a little twinkle in her eye, the teacher answered, patience, my dear, patience. And if you've ever read the genealogies, you can kind of understand. I thought that was so cute, but it's true. When we're going through times of waiting in limbo, we've got to be patient. It's real basic, real simple, but it's so true. Psalm 27, verse 13 and 14 says, wait patiently for the Lord. Be brave and courageous. Yes, wait patiently for the Lord. Psalm 37:7 says, be still in the presence of the Lord and wait patiently for him to act. Romans 12:12, rejoice in our confident hope. Be patient in trouble and keep on praying. Keep on praying. So guys, how can we demonstrate patience while we wait in limbo? How can we demonstrate patience? Can you think of anything?
I think this is like one of the hardest things for me personally, because I'm always looking for what's next. God, what do you want me to do next? What's the next step? Whatever the next thing is. And I feel like that's kind of our society. Like sometimes we are so focused on the destination that we forget the path that we're on. And so for me, a lot of times what I do is I focus on the solution, which is Jesus, right? And it's easier said than done sometimes, because I know for me, my natural personality is what's next? But I don't want to miss everything that's right in front of me. Because there's people in my life that God strategically places in my life now that I'm supposed to get to know, that I'm supposed to love on, that they're supposed to love on me. And if I'm so focused on what's next, I miss what's right in front of me.
That's good.
So I just focus on the solution.
Yeah, that even really applies. Gary?
No, I was just going to say, one of the things that I found very useful in this last summer when I experienced loss was just choosing to remember. Throughout Psalms, really, the David and the psalmist talked about remembering the goodness of God, remembering. And so making that conscious effort to sit down and open up the Word and to slow down and just make the effort to remember what God has done in you in the past, what He has accomplished in you. Remember His goodness, and not so much what we're facing and feeling right now, but just the instruction from the Word. Just remember.
Absolutely.
Remember the Lord.
That's good, Gary. I just wrote down a few little things. First of all, when we're to demonstrate patience, maybe in times of limbo, just first of all, remain calm, don't overreact, and understand that there's gonna be an end to the troubles that we're in. It will come to an end at some point in time. I can't help but think there was a Southern gospel group many years ago, and I'm pulling at some of my roots here, okay? But the Martins, and many of you have heard of the Martins, but they sang this song, "It didn't come to stay, it came to pass." I don't know if you guys have ever heard that, but the chorus says that. It didn't come to stay, it came to pass. The Lord will move that mountain if you'll ask. The trials that we see today won't last because it didn't come to stay, it came to pass. There's a poet, Victor Hugo, once said, "Have courage for the great sorrows or the great trials of life, and patience for the small ones. And when you have laboriously accomplished your daily tasks, go to sleep in peace, because God is awake." Yeah, that's true. I like that so much. When you've done all that you can, go to sleep in peace, because God is awake. So when waiting in limbo, we've got to be patient. Number 2, real quickly, this is going to sound real simple, but I think people need to hear it. Be pleasant. Be pleasant. Don't be a grouch. Don't be hard to be with. I understand that when we're confined in our homes and our small quarters with our families, sometimes it can exacerbate a problem or anger or whatever that's going on. But be kind to one another. Let the joy of the Lord be seen in you. I heard on the news the other day that domestic violence 911 calls was up. And then Pastor Larry, you were just saying this morning that child abuse calls are up. And that breaks my heart. I mean, if that's the case, then you need more separation in your home, because your home shouldn't be filled with violence and anger. You need to plead the blood of Jesus over your homes, really. Don't let that ever be the case for God's people. Rather, let us be an example of patience and kindness and pleasantness for everyone around us. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 2 says, "Always be humble and gentle, and be patient with each other." That's talking about families too. Making allowance for each other's faults, because why? Because of your love. Because you love. God gave us those families. God gave us those kids. God gave us those spouses. Love them. Be patient. And listen, we all have those moments. We're all human where, something's just grating on your nerves. Be calm, walk away, come back to it later. Cool off. Would anybody agree with that? I mean, have y'all found that to be good in your homes when you're facing those, those tense moments? Maybe your kids aren't listening to anything you're saying, and you just be calm, walk away, cool off. Help us, Lord.
I would say it goes back to what Gary was saying. When I don't spend time with Jesus in the morning, I'm a different person through that day. Yeah. I am unfortunately leaning towards more Johnny Sayers than Jesus, and so. It's interesting. So all these words are characters of the fruit of the Spirit. Right. To have patience and joy and kindness, forbearance and all of that. And so, love a quote that Ravi says. He says that it's important to pray. He likes to pray in the morning rather than at evening. Probably both. so he wants to see the world through God's eyes rather than seeing God through the world's eyes. And I think that, if you think of God, a rhetorical question, is God impatient at this time? No. Why is that? It's because he knows what's going on. He can see things for what they are. And I think if we can see things for what they are, we have no need to be impatient. We have no need to be, but there's this wrestle that's happening at the minute between people's flesh and their spirit. And it's not that people weren't more angry or abusive before, it's just being exposed now. So the dad who's now beating his children, it's because work was keeping him a little bit drunk. It was kind of keeping him comfortable and a little bit tipsy in the world. But now that he's hit reality, is that he's these things are coming out and they're being exposed. And so we've said from the start that this whole thing is going to expose people for who they are. It's not that they're being more selfish now, it's that they were selfish. We're just getting to see it, see it happen. And so, but I think seeing things through God's eyes, and that only comes from abiding, having the mind of Christ.
Yeah, I think of a scripture out of just Psalms. It just says, "Be still and know that I am God." And sometimes we just have to stop and have a breathing moment.
Right.
I remember when our kids were small, and of course we had the three within, Tracy, my oldest daughter Patrice was 2 when our twins were born, so we had just 3, 2 years apart. And sometimes when all the kids we get going, even their laughing became an aggravation. So because you're having this tense moment, you're trying to do something, and it's just, I can remember driving in the car on a vacation, and you're in a different city. And in those days, Debbie's trying to read a map, and I'm trying to figure it out, and the kids are just, it's like, tight places, stressful situations. It can. Yeah, sugar. It can bring out things in us, reveal some things in us that we need to work through.
That's good.
But I really think that's where, even like the scripture I just made mention of, just sometimes we just need to be still and know that he's God. And if I can use the same song I've been talking for a couple of weeks, he's got the whole world in his hands.
That's good.
And he's got us. And sometimes we just need to stop and breathe and remind ourselves. And I've had to remind myself this week because of some things that have happened for me in my own house, in my own life, that I had to remind myself, okay, he's got you, Larry. Breathe. Just breathe.
That's good.
And if I could add to that, I think that our prayer in this time, when those situations arise, shouldn't be, God, help me get back to work so that I can not be this person. It should be, God, deal with this inside of me. I want to work on my character at the moment. I don't want to mask it again for 10 years, 15 years. I want to thank you, God, for exposing who I am. Like, let's try and work on this.
So again, while waiting in limbo, be patient and be pleasant. Be easy to be around. Here's another one. Be active. Don't be that couch potato. Listen, we're all tempted. We've all got our binge shows that we like to watch, or whatever the case. But continue doing and growing. Now, I'm talking about while we're waiting to go back to work, some of you out there, and take advantage of the moment. Make lemonade out of lemons, right? And yes, it's a unique moment that we're living in, a time of uncertainty. And yes, we're in limbo, but we've got to keep moving forward. So what are some ways, guys, that you're doing to continue to be active while we have this shelter at home?
I think it's important that we don't fix what is not broken. So meaning that if we did devotions before, we shouldn't stop doing them. Correct. There's things that we did before as believers, and just because the world is shut down doesn't mean we need to shut down. Right. And it's important because, like Gary was saying, we all have our routines, right? So a lot of people will get up, they'll take a shower, they'll get their coffee, they'll do their devotion. But when their routine is all out of whack, all of a sudden now they don't have to do their devotions. Yeah. Now they're not spending time with God. Now they're under this microscope of their home with all the pressure, and people are exploding, and there's all these things. Well, we need to know how things work when they are working. Like, I can't fix a car if I don't know how it works in the first place, right? And when everything is going good, what are we doing when it's going good? When we're in the right relationship with God, and we need to continue to do those things. We need to continue to be active and growing our faith and growing our relationship with God.
Yeah, I listed a whole bunch of things, not only in the spiritual, but just some practical things for moms and dads and families at home. Do some special projects around the house. Do them together. Family projects are very bonding. Spend time with your kids. Reconnect with loved ones. There's some of you out there that need to reconnect with somebody in your life that you're kind of have a broken relationship. While you have some downtime, while you're not at work for 12 hours, call them up on the phone. Talk to them. Reestablish relationship. Meet your neighbors. I tell you what, I've met more neighbors recently than before this happened. I didn't know many of them. I knew some of them, but I have met so many neighbors that are just out on the streets walking with their kids. And it has been really refreshing. Develop friendships. Share your faith with them. Let them know that you're available if ever they need something. And that opens that door for the witness of Jesus Christ. And start new godly routines. You're talking about the family devotions. Maybe some of you out there haven't even started a family devotion. Do it now. Now's a good time. Read the Bible together. And then, of course, we all have lists of things, of projects that we want to try to do around the house. We want to do it for a long time. Hey, friends, now's the time. Can we be very practical? Now's the time. And some of you, going back to what Pastor William was saying, have spiritual goals that you've wanted to do for a long time. Some of you read the Bible through. Whatever it is, start memorizing Scripture. Now's the time. Make the best use of you can of this time that you're waiting in limbo. Be active. Number 4, and I've just got 3 more I want to share real quick. When waiting in limbo, and just what should we do? Be faithful. I can't stress that enough. And guys, let's just throw this out there. What are some ways that we can continue to demonstrate our faith while we wait? What are some things that we can do to demonstrate that faith while we wait in this situation that we're in?
One of the things that I can say worked really well for me is when it comes to our faith, do what you're supposed to do. Because when you're going through a hard time, getting back to the story of what Job went through, when I've dealt with loss, the hardest thing to do was to do the things that I was supposed to do that facilitated spiritual growth, that cultivated my relationship with the God. I know every day I'm supposed to read the Word, not because I'm required to do it, but because I need to do it. Yes. I know every day that I'm supposed to pray, not because I'm required to do it, but because I need to do it. So doing the things that I know that I am supposed to do for my own good, for my own spiritual health, my own spiritual journey, is something that I learned for me that helped keep pushing me forward.
That's good. And I even wrote down that very thing. Be faithful in prayer. Be faithful. Be faithful in what? Be faithful in prayer. James 5:16, one of our favorite verses around here. The earnest prayer of a righteous person avails much. It has great power, produces wonderful results. Be faithful in reading and studying God's word. Psalm 130 verse 5, I wait for the Lord. My whole being waits in his word. I put my hope. Another thought that I had is be faithful in sharing your faith. What a tool we have today, this social media. What a tool. 20 years ago, we're able to communicate with more people today in a click of the button than we've ever been able to in the history of mankind. And I would just ask this question, guys, what recommendations might you make to Christians when it comes to social media posts? Because I think we sometimes need some reminders out there. We truthfully do, and I think we all need reminders.
Ephesians 4:2.
Okay.
Be humble, be gentle, be patient, and bear with one another in love.
Yeah,
Be humble, be patient, be gentle.
Yeah, just share hope.
Yes.
Share Christ because of who Christ, the love, the grace, the forgiveness, the salvation. Share hope. People are looking for hope right now. And we know the great giver of hope, the only hope, and that is Jesus Christ.
Right.
I think when I get riled up, if I see a post on social media that I don't like, my natural instinct is to write something back and give them some truth, and change them forever. But then I sit down and I think for about an hour, let my blood settle again.
Good.
And then I realize that Jesus did things through relationships, and he did things through being with people. And then I think I'm going to go and pour this frustration into hanging out with some of the guys, and discipling some of the guys. And that on the grand scheme of things is going to do much more than getting involved in this stupid thing.
It's better not to get involved.
I think for me personally, the best way that people could use social media is what God is laying on your heart, tell somebody else. Because whatever God gives us, it's not just for us, it's also for somebody else. Right? So if God is laying a scripture on your heart, if you see something that's inspirational, share it. Because we can only fill our cups up so much. So we have to empty our cups into somebody else so we can get refilled, right? So the best way is if you see something that inspires you, share it so it inspires somebody else. If God tells you a verse and lays it on your heart, share it so it inspires somebody else. That's a really good way. If you don't know what to put on social media, to start getting.
Yeah, and I agree. I think the key that you're saying there is something that inspires, not something that condemns or something that causes despair or fear. Even just be positive in your comments on social media so that people can say, man, I want to have that attitude. I don't know about you, but I like to hear people that are positive. I know even recently our president has been dogged about being too positive or, what do you want him to be is my question, I guess. I want a leader that's positive. I know that there are bad things going on, but I have hope. I want hope. And I think we can share that and share love and compassion. And another thing in being faithful is be faithful in serving others. I read a quote by someone, and I want you to think about this because I'm going to ask you what you think about it. And we're getting really close to the end here. But this person said this. They said, when you wait as though you're waiting on tables at a restaurant. We're talking about serving others. When you wait as though you're waiting on tables at a restaurant. What do you think about that? What comes to mind? Go ahead, Pastor Larry.
Well, I hope it's a good waiter, because I've had both. But just to use that as an example, I think we've all been at a restaurant where you had a waiter that was disinterested,
right?
That we never held their attention. They were never around, and when you were there, they were just versus a waiter that was very attentive. It's like when your glass was half empty, they filled it back up, and if it's at Papacitos or Gringos, and they were filling the chips and salsa, just kept that coming.
Right.
Man, and then when it's time for the tip, you tipped them well. But the difference is that person was attentive, and I think so. Going to the quote of what you're saying on serving others is be attentive.
Yeah, serve them.
Be attentive. Just pay attention.
Yeah, it reminds me of the quote that Pastor Larry, you said a few weeks ago, is that, clean your hands, but continue to be cleaning people's feet, continue to be serving. And I think in all times, it's good to, the best thing we can do often is to get our mind off of ourselves, Selfishness is sin. And so if we can be thinking outwardly instead of inwardly, we say a lot that when we're not fighting outwards, we start to fight inwards. And so that could go back to families kind of finding it hard being together. But just staying faithful in that way. I know that for me, when I was financially, I know a lot of people are financially, it's a real thing at the minute because there's jobs and there's rent that has to be paid. And so everybody is tightening their belts. Everyone is thinking, I can't pay this next month. And I remember a time 10 years ago when financially it was just really bad for me. And lots of things were coming up that I had to pay for. And guess what God came after? He came after my money, as in he said, no, I want you to give. And again, when something's exposed, God puts the pressure on and then he wants us to deal with it. And so I think in this time is when something like tithing and giving and finance, and I'll talk about it because it's a big thing. Finances and money is a real thing that, and obviously God doesn't just want our money; He wants every single part of us. But it's almost when it becomes real, and it's not that we have to continue to give what we gave. It's like the lady who gave the 2 coins, But it was a sacrifice. It was the same sacrifice. It may not have been the same amount, but it was still the same sacrifice. And so I think we can always give. God always gives us enough to give. I remember in Africa, a lady came forward with like a watermelon to the front and gave it in the offering. God always gives us enough to share. And I think that in this time, remaining faithful, and I will say it financially, because it is a big thing in our world, and God is after it because he doesn't want us to be clinging on to our money because it would drag us into hell.
Yeah, it reminds me of when Jesus was talking about in Matthew chapter 25-23, he's talking about the parable of the 3 servants who the master had given them bags of silver. He gave one 5 bags, he gave another one 2 bags, he gave one bag. Well, the one with the 5 bags, he went and he duplicated it, came back with 5 more to the master. When the master returned, the other one with the 2 came back with 2 more. But the one with the 1, what'd he do? He buried it, right? And so the master comes back and really chastises him and takes it away from him and wants to give it to one who's going to invest it. And I just wrote down this: be faithful in the little things. Even if it's the 1, be faithful in the little things. And at the end of that parable, Jesus says, and the master will tell you, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things, and I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. So being faithful during times of waiting and in limbo. And then this one right here, and I've got 2 more. I've got to hurry real quick. We'll go through these fast. But be steadfast. This is a word we don't use very much around here. It means to be firm in our beliefs, to be determined, to be immovable, to be resolute, talking about our faith. Be steadfast in our faith. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 58, Paul says this. He says, so my dear brothers and sisters, be steadfast and strong and immovable. Always work enthusiastically for the Lord, for you know that nothing you do for the Lord is ever useless. You know, James 1:12, blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test of time, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him. Be steadfast in these times of waiting. Don't give up. Never surrender. You know, it amazes me, and this was a thought that I had, it amazes me how some Christians that when they go through difficult times, they'll give up on God and turn their back on him, and they'll blame him for their troubles. Yet on the other hand, many non-Christians, when they go through difficult times, what do? They go to church and they start praying and they cry out to God. It's an interesting conundrum that you have there. But let us be steadfast and resolute in our faith. And I think about the scripture of 2 Corinthians 4 where Paul says, we are pressed on every side by troubles. We're not crushed. We are perplexed, but we're not driven to despair. We are hunted down, but never abandoned by God. We get knocked down, but we are not destroyed. Amen. And we don't give up. He says in verse 16 of that same chapter there, that is why we never give up. Though our bodies are dying, our spirits are being renewed every day, for our present troubles are small. And listen to this, they won't last very long. Aren't you thankful for that? Yet they produce for us glory that vastly outweighs them and will last forever. So we don't look at the troubles we can see now. Rather, we fix our gaze on things that cannot be seen, for the things that we see now will soon be gone, but the things we cannot see will last forever. So when waiting in limbo, we should be steadfast. And then my last point is when we're waiting in limbo is we need to trust in God. It's real simple, trust in him. Focus on God's goodness and faithfulness, as you said earlier, Gary. Keep our eyes fixed on him. Acknowledge that he's in control and understand that everything that's going on right now must fit into his plan. It must fit into his plan. He has a bigger purpose and a bigger plan than we can even imagine or understand. And I think about Pastor Larry just recently reminded us that God doesn't waste anything. He doesn't even waste the situation that we're going through right now. Something he's going to bring good out of the situation that we're in right now. And then Pastor Larry, you also mentioned this, I think, the other day, and if not, maybe I misremembered it, but Corrie ten Boom said, never be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God. And I love that. Never be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God. Job trusted God, and we all know how that story ends. Job he comes back, he gets his health back, he gets his wealth back, he has more children, has a bigger family, has more influence, and through it all, his integrity remains intact. And he's got a great testimony, and here we are, thousands of years later, talking about Job. Let that be us. Let that be us as we go through that. Guys, that's really wrapping up everything that I had to say tonight. Is there anything that y'all wanted to add to
I've said a lot, but something that just last thing I want to say is that I all of these things had been cut off Job. You know, they'd been all taken away. But I do believe that Job going into that situation, he had already given it away in his heart. And I would say that I think the only way he could have responded the way he did was that he had been in prayer each day saying, God, I give this to you. I give this to you. So that when the time came, it wasn't this thing that had been torn off him and was, painful and emotional, but he was able to, he had learned through humility prior rather than reality hitting him in the face, which is what a lot of people are going through at the minute, but through humility, realizing these are God's things, not mine, and going into the situation, it was a lot easier for him.
Right.
Yeah, we can either choose to get bitter or we can get better.
That's good.
And that's the reality. And then going back to God doesn't waste anything. The caveat to that is God doesn't waste anything if we'll give everything to him.
Yeah, that's good.
If we don't surrender it to him, then we will be bitter. And we'll never get anything. But if we'll surrender that to him, God will do something incredible through us.
I want to share one last thing, and we'll close with a word of prayer. Pastor Larry's going to conclude it. But I saw this today. Dr. Ravi Zacharias, one of the leading Christian apologists, put out an email today. And for many of you know that he's been battling cancer and going through chemotherapy. And he's here in Houston, at MD Anderson right now. But he put out a little poem that I thought was so beautiful. And even he said himself, it's so poignant for today. And it's by Annie Johnson Flint. And I want to read that for you as we're concluding. It says this. He says, talking about God, he giveth more grace when the burdens grow greater. He sendeth more strength when the labors increase. To added affliction, he addeth his mercy. To multiplied trials, he multiplies peace. When we have exhausted our store of endurance, when our strength has failed ere the day is half done, when we reach the end of our hoarded resources, our Father's full giving is only begun. His love has no limit. His grace has no measure. His power no boundary known unto men. For out of his infinite riches is in Jesus, he giveth and giveth and giveth again. That's awesome.
And Annie Johnston Flint was bedfast.
Wow.
She was bedfast and had all kinds of afflictions. Just if you were to read about her incredible pain that she lived with, pillows all around her, just to be able to try to figure out how to keep her comfortable in bed. And she wrote that. Love it.
Go ahead and conclude us. Amen. I just want to offer a word of prayer with you as you're watching here, and just know that we love you and we're praying for you. We know that that God is with us, and we're going to trust in him every day. And I hope these are just a few little practical things that you can take with you and even expound on. You could have probably done this Bible study much better than me, but we thank you for joining us. So let's just conclude in prayer together right where you're at. Father, we thank you for your word that's alive and God, that's moving in our hearts and in our lives. We thank you for your faithfulness, that you continue to be with us through the difficulties that we're facing. And Lord, we don't know when this thing will end. We don't know when we'll be able to be together again. But God, until then, we will remain faithful. We will remain steadfast, God. We will remain close to you. God, I just pray your blessings upon our church family. God, bless each one, their families and their families. God, just be with each one of us as we walk this uncharted territory. And Lord, help us to grow in our faith and trust in you. I pray your blessings on each child, Lord, in our church. God, just continue to love on them. And God, just all of us. We thank you for your great love. We thank you for your mercy. We thank you for Jesus, our Savior. And we give you praise in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. We hope you'll join us this coming Sunday, Palm Sunday. We're excited about that. 9 o'clock, our Spanish service. 9:30, our kids' stuff will be released on NC Kids Facebook. And then at 10 o'clock is going to be our regular service on Facebook Live, also on YouTube. Join us for then. Just want to tell you also something about Sunday is that we're planning to take communion together at the close of the service. So we're going to let you prepare to take communion in your own house. Get bread, crackers, get you some juice. Do it as a family. And at the close of our message on Sunday, we're going to take communion. I think it's going to be a beautiful time. You get to have communion, serve it to your own family, and be there together in your house. And so that's going to happen this Sunday. Tomorrow night, there's going to be something for our kids. There's going to be Facebook Live with Lori Morrow. Going to be talking about schooling, because now a lot of our kids are being schooled at home. And so from public school to the home school, Lori Morrow is going to be sharing some great insights, some encouragement things to you. So don't miss that tomorrow night, starting at 8 o'clock tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. So we love you guys. God bless you. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.